Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar titled How to Avoid Rejections Due to Language Mistakes, which is conducted in collaboration with the German Scholars Organization. GSO is an independent non-profit organization which has been empowering researchers for more than 17 years. This webinar will provide researchers with practical and useful tips on how to improve their academic writing skills and discuss the importance of proofreading their manuscripts. So obviously, all content in this presentation is owned and licensed by Crimson Interactive or its affiliates, and it's available under a CC by NCSA license. So just a few words about the two speakers. I'm Tony O'Rourke. I'm Vice President for Partnerships at Inago. I've had about 30 years in academic publishing, and I'm part of the team that makes author services, knowledge services available to researchers and authors around the world. And I've served on various publishing council bodies over the last 20 years. Let me present my colleague Anne Schreiter. Anne, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, hello everyone. My name is Anna. I'm the Executive Director of the GSO. I will talk about that later. My background is in sociology, and you might hear I'm a German native speaker myself, and even though it's been a while since I wrote an academic paper, I'm quite aware of the difficulties that come with language and crafting a good narrative. I transitioned from academia to the nonprofit sectors a few years ago, and yeah, and now work for the GSO, and that means we are a nonprofit organization in Berlin, and yeah, we're independent, so we're not connected to like a big organization or something. And yeah, our goal is to empower researchers to build a career in Germany, either in academia but also in other sectors, and we do that by advising them. So you can book career advisory sessions with us regarding your CV or your career strategy. And we also yeah, offer different programs together with foundations. So check out our website on www.gsonet.org to learn more about us. So we will be talking about research papers today and how to craft a good story. But I also want to talk a little bit about how you are also your story, and crafting your own career strategy is very important. That doesn't mean you have to have a fixed plan, but I think it is very important to be proactive and make informed decisions. Also, like you today, inform yourself about the hard currency of academic publishing. It's also important to learn how all of this sort of works together. So these are just a few points I will briefly talk about. So make sure at the beginning of your career, when you're a PhD, also when you're a postdoc, figure out what do you stand for, what's your niche, who you are as a researcher, what's like your thing, right? And then try to translate that into a message. How can you yeah, translate all of the ideas you have into a good message that you convey to others, for instance, at a job interview, or when you give a talk and have to introduce yourself. And then also become visible. Make sure you're visible as a researcher. I know it sometimes may feel a little bit awkward, but it's really important to be seen by the right people. That can be through social media. Twitter is a great channel, but also by reaching out for giving a talk or doing stuff like that. And reaching out is important also in building a network, because that really can help you to learn more about the informal aspects of an academic career. So make sure to talk to peers about application processes, about the right timing, about how an application should look like. So keep that in mind, that you are yourself are also the message, and the career strategy is super helpful for you. A brief overview over the research landscape in Germany. So always keep in mind, also when you think about your career strategy, that there are different players, different research organizations, universities, maybe non-university research institutions like the Max Planck Institutes or Leibniz or Fraunhofer Society. So make sure to know how are they funded. Do you have to teach? Do you not have to teach? Do they more support applied research or more basic research? So this is also important when you build your network or sort of consider where do you want to apply for or work for later on, to have that in mind. There's a link down below so you can learn a little bit more about the different organizations and institutes. I also want to tell you a little bit about academic career paths in Germany. So you might know, if you're in Germany or have contacts to the German academic landscape, that the system is still quite hierarchical, and there are not very many interesting positions beside permanent professorship in an academic career, right? You can always transition to the non-academic job market or research supporting positions, but if you want to have that permanent professorship, it's a long and it's a rocky path. So make sure you have a little bit of an idea how to do that, and get help on that path. So what is the trickiest part, the bottleneck phase, is between basically postdoc and a permanent professorship. And there you have a lot of options in Germany, because you have access to the German research landscape, like independent junior research groups. The Eminöter program by the DFG is quite well known. You can also tap into the European research market, like the ERC program. Just recently, Germany introduced tenure track positions where you can start out as a W1 or a junior professor and then go to the next step on a tenure track. But also group leader positions are available in connection to non-university research institutions. So make sure you often need a host institutions to apply for these things. Therefore, networking and visibility is super important. Keep that in mind, and if you have more questions about, the German research landscape, about your portfolio, about your career strategy, we're super happy to help. You can reach out to me personally or the GSO. You have all the information. We'll get all the information about that. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Anne. We'll have a chance to talk to Anne again at the end of the webinar, when we have a chance to answer some questions. But let's dive straight into the webinar itself. A few words about Inago. For those of you who don't know who we are, we're one of the world's leading providers of author services. We were founded in 2005 and we operate worldwide. We've worked with more than 2 million authors since we started work in 2005. We cover pretty much every subject area, and our editors have an average of nearly 20 years experience in supporting editorial content. What do we do? Well, all of our services are really designed with you, the researcher, the author, in mind. For example, the Inago Academy is our author training platform, which educates authors through a number of resources, including webinars as well as live workshop sessions. I really would urge you to visit the Inago Academy for more detail on all of the things that we discussed today. There's a lot of very useful, and I will add, free information on this. So if you get a chance, please do visit the Academy. We also have an e-learning platform for researchers called Inago Learn, which guides you on best practice in academic publishing. And we have Inago Consult, which is the industry's first live one-to-one video consultation and mentorship program to help researchers guide them through the whole process of scholarly communication. Our core activities, though, is around the preparation and development of manuscript services. We offer a world-class service for researchers at different stages of their research career. This includes things like the 2-editor language editing service, both native English speaking, all academic specialists in their field. We also offer academic translation and manuscript preparation and publication support services. The Inago promise is that a manuscript that is edited by Inago will not be rejected on the basis of language. If on those very rare occasions, it does very occasionally happen, very, very rarely, but when it does happen, if rejection occurs and it's because of language, we will re-edit the paper for resubmission for you at no cost. Our full after-sales service will support you through the whole process of helping you to get the paper published, and it's designed to support you at every single step. We also have a number of communication support services which are designed to help researchers communicate their findings effectively. These include services such as video creation, video abstracts, plain English summaries, press releases, plus lots more. And we also have a medical writing service, which is used to help mostly pharmaceutical companies in terms of educating the medical community on new drugs and new practices. But again, any information you need about our service, please do visit inago.com. I'm sure you'll get the answers to your questions there. Okay, that's 10 minutes. Let's just talk very quickly about the collaboration between GSO and Inago. GSO and Inago have been collaborating since the middle of last year. The whole idea is to help the GSO network of researchers to get better value from Inago services. So that includes reductions, discounts on academic editing services and translations. We have academic translation services available in many languages. You can also visit the GSO site to get more information about the Academy and some of the content we have on the Academy. And we also offer Inago Learn and Inago Consult services at a discounted price for the GSO network. Right, let's get on to why you're all here, which is how to make sure your manuscript is as good as possible and avoid those simple mistakes that very often occur during the writing of a manuscript. I'm going to cover 4 topics today. 1, the importance of good English writing skills. 2, an overview of common language and grammar mistakes. 3, look at some tips to improve the clarity and fluency of your manuscripts. And finally, some important tips when it comes to editing and proofreading your content. So the first thing we're going to look at is the importance of good writing skills. So why is it important? Why should it matter? Well, hopefully it's fairly self-explanatory. It helps you to communicate your research effectively. It helps you to increase your chances for publication and the impact that the manuscript might have. Having worked in academic publishing and in journals publishing for a long time, I can't tell you the number of papers that are being submitted that don't necessarily get rejected straight away because of language, although some of the very high quality journals will reject if the language isn't to the right standard, but where the publishers say, no, this needs more work, we need to go back, we need to challenge or push this back to the author to make some improvements before this paper can go any further forward. Sorry. It's important that the data is presented accurately and that any analysis is communicated clearly. And of course, it's important that, for example, when assisting in securing research grants, trying to communicate a persuasive idea, facilitating academic promotion, and influencing a global audience. It's so important that your message is clear, clearly written, and clearly communicated. So some very simple tips in terms of, what's the first thing you should be thinking about in terms of how to improve your skills. Well, the first thing I can suggest, and I'm sure you all do this, but I can't underemphasize, is read, read, and read, and then read some more. Whether it's journal articles, books, magazines, whatever, use the literature to improve your language. Use dictionaries and thesauruses to familiarize yourself with unknown terms. Keep a notebook of terminologies or new technical terms, and it can encourage yourself to try maybe to learn a new word every day. Get to the root of a word, help in understanding other words with the same root, and practice, practice, practice. Actively use that new vocabulary in conversations, in related articles, and you can never make a bad mistake. A mistake is something that you learn from and you build on. So just keep on trying, keep on reading, keep referring to dictionary thesauri, keep those notebooks open, and understand where those words come from, and practice, practice, practice. So we're going to look now at some of the common grammatical errors that are made. I should say we're doing this from the background that we've been in business now since 2005. We've edited over, certainly we've supported over 2 million authors in that time. So we see these errors occur time and time again. The errors tend to fall into 6 main categories: subject-verb agreement, or disagreement, I should say, the errors, the incorrect use of articles such as a and the wrong use of tense. Are you using the correct tense to describe a particular part of your process? The incorrect use of preposition words, punctuation errors, excuse me, and of course, writing style errors. Now let's look at each of these in turn. Subject-verb disagreements are probably the most common error. It's so important that a sentence is clear, and having the correct subject-verb link unifies the sentence by making it easy to understand. The quantity of the subject needs to be identified, and the tense will help you to correctly address that. After subject identification, the verb needs to be matched to it. An incorrect subject-verb agreement can confuse your readers. So here's some examples of good and bad. As you can see here, all of these things are understandable within the red boxes. They're perfectly understandable, and if you submit a paper including those errors, then a good editor will correct those errors. But it's better if you can make those changes yourself, and once you make those changes, continue to apply those changes. So for example, the use of an indefinite article such as citric acid was used as solvent. It should be as a solvent generally, and you can see where the indefinite article should be applied. And indeed, the correct use of the singular and the plural. So for example, one of the most common errors is the tense used for the noun data. Data is a plural noun, so please use are rather than is. And also make sure that you are using and correctly rather than commas. We first outline the overall architecture and then describe the components in detail. Indefinite pronouns always go with singular verbs. An indefinite pronoun is something like everyone, or all, or they, or it. Indefinite pronouns such as anyone, everybody, everyone, nobody, no one, and someone are always taken as singular verbs, and they need to be accompanied by singular verbs. So singular nouns, they always need to be accompanied by singular verbs. It's tempting to think that everybody, for example, is a plural subject. It's not, it's singular. It refers to singulars, that refers to each and every person in a crowd. Therefore, it is singular. The crowd is a singular object. All and some can be treated as singular and plural, depending on the context. When singular, they refer to things that cannot be counted and therefore agree with singular verbs. Many nouns look plural, such as the crowd or the community, but actually count as singular verbs. Singular nouns, I beg your pardon. It should be noted that if members of the noun are not acting in unity as a group, then the nouns should be treated as plural and matches with a plural verb. So the crowd cheers on. Thousands of voters line up outside, a singular noun and a singular verb. Okay, let's look at some more examples. For example, nouns that denote amounts of time, money, and distance are also treated as singular. 12 hours was a long time to wait. $8,000 is too high rather than are too high. Fractions can be both singular and plural, depending on the noun they describe. So, for example, 50% of the book, the object is 50%, is composed of pictures. About 1/3 of the population has voted. So those singular fractions are treated as singular nouns and should be conjugated accordingly. Neither or either is also considered singular and agree with singular verbs. Neither of the cats is black, for example, rather than neither of the cats are black, which is a tempting thing to say. I mean, as a native English speaker, I might even say myself, none of the cats are black, but it is correct to say none of the cats is black. So the definite article the should be used when we refer to any specific object. It is, and this is, you see this very, very often, particularly from papers outside of Europe. In Europe, it tends to be more common to include the definite article. Outside of Europe, interestingly, less so. It's used when referring to proper nouns or any specific context. So for example, United Nations should be the United Nations, founded in 1945. Always describe the specific object with a the. Indefinite articles such as a or an are used when the noun is being described or is describing many items. So, for example, this research is a major step forward in medical science, or the Human Genome Project was an exciting development rather than was simply exciting. And any noun, when used in generic reference, is usually used in plural form without the definite article. So, for example, the colonies have been isolated from the plate. When you're starting a sentence, that can be started quite simply as colonies have been isolated from the plate. Bring the test tube from the table. And mass nouns that cannot be counted often have indefinite articles associated with them. So mass nouns like wisdom, knowledge. Wisdom is not a product of schooling. That still requires an indefinite article to be associated with it. So why is it important to use the correct verb with the correct tenses? Verb tenses inform the readers when a certain event or an action takes place, past, present, future. Past tense is generally used for reporting the findings of a study. The present perfect tense, he went, he has, he did, is used to describe an ongoing research or a general opinion. And the present tense is mostly used to give an overview of the topic and stating the main points of the study. So let's look at some examples. In a typical manuscript or an academic paper, the introduction section is generally written in the simple present tense. This paper analyzes the effect of high temperatures rather than analyzed. The method section is usually written in the simple past tense. Statistical analyses were used rather than are used. And the discussion and the conclusion sections of a manuscript usually can be written in both present and past, depending on the context. Table 1 presented the structural unit, Table 1 presents the structural units are both correct, depending on the context where it's written within the paper. The present perfect tense is used to give a background to this context. So, for example, numerous researchers use this method. It's better to say numerous researchers have used this method, present perfect tense. And the future tense is used to describe the possibilities of future studies that can be conducted. We analysed the colonies and found out the strains. It is more correct to say that we, or future studies, will analyse the colonies and find out the strains. So future tense is used to describe the possibilities of future studies. Let's get to the right point in my slides. So let's look now at how to use prepositions correctly. A preposition, what is a preposition, first of all? A preposition is a word that tells you where or when something is in relation to something else. So examples of preposition words might include like, after, before, on, under, inside, outside. Of is a very common preposition. Of indicates a reference. This is a picture of my last birthday, for example. Or of can also specify a number or an amount. A good number of people understand English. For, again, a common error is mixing up the uses of and for. For is used to indicate the reason why something happens or because of. I am really happy for you. I'm really happy because of you. Let's look at some punctuation rules. Commas. Commas are used in sentences to show that something is following, like a quotation or an example or a list. I'm not going to go into the detail of dashes. There are so many rules around the use of dashes. But the example here is if you're using a chemical, if you're talking about a scientific object and you're linking two abbreviations together, it is more common to apply a dash to link the two together. And again, a very common error is the use of colons and semicolons. Colons are used in sentences to show that something is following, like a quotation or an example, or a list, for example. Semicolons are used to join two independent clauses or two complete thoughts that can stand alone as a complete sentence. And here we have two examples of the use of a semicolon and a colon. Rock formation in the area is dominated by volcanic rock sediments. Semicolon, young and old rocks are present in the volcanic zones. You could insert an and instead of the semicolon, but of course that would make the sentence too long. and it's good form to apply the semicolon at that point. Okay, other common writing errors. This is always a great point of argument: the use of English rather than American English. The first thing I would say is when you're writing your paper, always check the journal style guide. What does the publisher expect? Most international journals will accept either. I had many conversations with large society publishers and journal publishers. They will accept either, but certain journals will make a preference. So always check what the preference, what the style is. It's not correct to say that American journals will all accept American English and that British journals will accept British English. There may be a combination of two. Always check with the editor first to see what the preferred style is. Be careful of the use of capitalization. Again, you often see capitals used in the wrong place. If it's not an actual noun, make sure you're not capitalizing that term. So this approach for regional diabetes, for example, unless it's an organization called regional diabetes, will be in lowercase. Make sure that you're using spacing correctly as well, particularly after a unit of measurement. There's always a space between the number and the unit of measurement, 50 to 60 space hertz. Contractions. These include things like weren't, don't, aren't, words which unify the verb with a not, for example. They're not incorrect, but depending on the journal, some publishers will ask you not to use contractions within their papers. They're not correct, they're not incorrect, I should say, but do check the style guides. And also check out for common typographical errors. And you can see, for example, here, the example given is North Indian is used in uppercase where there should be North India. Just be careful of those simple typographical errors. Okay, so let's look at some tips to improve the fluency of the paper and to improve the clarity. So it's important to add precision to your scientific writing by supplementing numbers to words, such as increased or decreased. Rather than presenting raw values, establish a baseline so that readers will understand why that change is noteworthy. And those values can be expressed either as a fold, threefold, fourfold, fivefold, or as a percentage increase. Try not to use non-specific terms in the paper. So with the example given here, treatment A led to a significant increase in circulating cortisol levels. Well, what does significant actually mean? Try and use the actual supplementing numbers or represent those values in another way. Treatment A resulted in a significant fourfold increase in circulating cortisol levels. Specificity like this helps establish a baseline for what is normal and allows the reader to interpret the meaningfulness of the changes that are present. A decrease or an increase is meaningless if the reader doesn't know what it's being compared against. So try and be as specific as you can. Avoid lengthy citation fillers before summarizing or presenting findings. Focus on the key aspects. So for example, you very often see the year, the location, the name of the author that's given in the paper. It's much simpler just to refer to the author and the year and allow the reader to go to the references and find out more about that paper. So the example given here is in a 2009 study from the University of Georgia on the migration of monarch butterflies. Smith and al. Showed that. Well, that whole first line doesn't add anything. Smith et al. 2009 showed that. And if the reader wants to find out more about Smith and others, they can go to the reference and they can download that paper separately. Begin sentences with the principal findings by stressing on the key points first. Place the most important information on what's called the stress position. So let's look at these two examples here and compare the difference in impact. In the first example, in the incorrect statement, we say, In individuals with compromised immune systems, natural killer cells exhibited a twofold increase due to. Well, it's better to start with the principal finding in that stress position. A twofold decrease in the number of natural killer cells was observed. Stress that point first. Another example is when exposed to extreme cold, peripheral vasoconstriction occurs to decrease loss of heat. Start with the subject. Peripheral vasoconstriction occurs to decrease heat loss. Begin the sentence with that principal finding by stressing those key points first. Very, very useful tip to have. Now, the next couple of slides is talking about words that are very often misused. This could be 20 slides long. We're only focusing on 2 or 3 examples here, and 2 or 3 of the most common examples. Non-English language, native English language researchers very often get therefore and thereby wrong. Therefore indicates a conditional action, or in simple terms, for that reason. Thereby represents a process. In other words, as a result of that. And it depends on the subject of the sentence and where the subject appears in the sentence. So, for example, it's incorrect to say 3 participants opted out of the study, therefore reducing the sample size to 497, because it is as a result of 3 participants opting out of the study that the sample size was reduced. As a result of, therefore, should be thereby. Sorry, I'm confusing myself there. Equally, as it's described, if you're starting off with the subject of the studies, 3 participants dropped out of the study, therefore the sample size was reduced to 497. As a result of that action, the sample size was reduced. So please watch the use of therefore versus thereby. Therefore is a conditional action, thereby is a process as a result of that. 2 other words that are common mistakes. Between versus among. Between is used when there are 2 elements and exactly 2 elements involved. So if you've got 3 elements or 4 elements or 5 elements in that sentence, you should not use between. Among is used when more than 2 elements are involved. So between could be 2 elements. This particular example shows quantitative, qualitative, and mixed research, therefore will always be among. So between is for 2 elements, whereas among is used when you have 3 or more elements in that sentence. And may versus might is also another one you often see wrong. May denotes permission, whereas might denotes possibility. I think the simple thing to say about may versus might is really if there is a higher possibility, a high probability that something is going to happen, you use may. Again, I urge you please to visit the Inago Academy website. There are whole sections that look at some of these examples in real detail and will give you more examples in terms of what to use. Okay, another common error is about the inappropriate use and placement of numbers. Try not to start a sentence with a number. Try spelling out those numbers or rephrasing that sentence. Be consistent in the usage of numbers or spelled out numbers. It's not wrong to use numbers or to use spelled out numbers, but be consistent in their use. Don't mix numerals and spelled out numbers within a single sentence. So for example, if you're going to start with 100 samples, it is correct to say 100 and write out 100 rather than putting it in numbers. 7,500 patient records were submitted for analysis. Rather than starting with a number, it is better to say records from 7,500 patients were submitted for analysis. It's not wrong, it's better to start it that way, it's clearer. And here's another example where, again, you should not start the sentence with a number. 5-hydroxytryptamine is a neurotransmitter derived from tryptophan. The neurotransmitter is derived from tryptophan. Do not start with a number, start with a sentence. And again, here's an example of where numbers either written out or in number form should be used consistently through a sentence. So try not to mix numbers with spelled out numbers. Another, again, this is another very, very common mistake, is attributing human-like characteristics such as feelings or behaviors to non-human entities. That's called anthropomorphism. And Anne, as a sociologist, can probably tell us a lot more about anthropomorphism than I can. The example that we give here is around a study. A study is not a human entity. Therefore, it cannot find something. It cannot do actively find something. The study found that bacterial growth accelerated in media containing glucose. We understand it, but it's not correct because a study cannot find anything. It's the researchers or the investigators that find or draw conclusions based on certain observations that find. So in this particular example, we might say the researchers found that bacterial growth accelerated, or we might use a different verb, which doesn't necessarily give any sort of active action to the noun, by saying that the study revealed that bacteria, because revealed is a passive action, and it revealed that bacterial growth accelerated in media containing glucose. So try not to attribute active verbs with non-human entities. So let's now look quickly at the importance of proofreading your manuscript. So you've written your manuscript. It's now important to make sure your manuscript is as good as it can be before moving on to the next step. So what's the difference? Why is proofreading so important? Well, it goes without saying that it ensures that there are no grammatical errors or punctuation mistakes or spelling errors. It helps to identify any inconsistencies in the manuscript. It gives an opportunity to review the manuscript and add anything that might be missing, and results in a clearer, more succinct, and hopefully more readable content, making it a better fit for publication. So we look at the differences between editing and proofreading. During the proofreading stage, you're taking care of spellings, of punctuation, of capitalization, and that you've been consistent in your use of abbreviations, acronyms, or numbers. The editing process goes one stage further. It doesn't necessarily look at just spelling check, because all those things should already have taken place. The editing process looks at the use of grammar, checks for consistency in style or format, and many publishers will ask, or many journals will ask for a specific style or format, and that you're using the proper words. You may have spelled your words correctly, but are they the proper words to use in that context? And ensures that good editing will ensure that sentences are structured properly and flow properly. So if you're going to do your own proofreading, here are some simple tips. 1, check the numbers and calculations. Make sure they're correct. This is where mistakes can happen. Watch out for words that share the same pronunciation or spelling, but mean entirely different things, such as weak and week. Week as in 7 days a week, weak as in not strong. Break down your proofreading to spot one kind of error at a time. So you might want to break down your proofreading just to look for subject-verb agreements, or you might just want to look to check for spelling errors. Try and focus on one kind of error at a time. If you can't justify a point or a statement or a sentence or word, don't use it. Just get rid of it. Make a list of common errors and check carefully for those errors. Make a list of your common errors. What are the mistakes that you tend to make on a regular basis? Keep an active note of those. Don't overlook headings, bibliographies, tables, pages, numbers, or footnotes. They need to be checked just as thoroughly as the content themselves. Proofread each line correctly and carefully. Reading out loud from a hard copy might also help, because sometimes you can catch errors when you hear them rather than simply reading them. And put your writing aside for a while. Reviewing it with a fresh pair of eyes or a fresh mind can often help you to identify errors that you might have missed first time round. So to summarize, the final checklist are things that you need to do. Make sure, 1, that there is consistent usage of abbreviations and symbols. 2, make sure you've verified all the facts and figures. 3, make sure that the article is clear, concise, and coherent and has a logical flow. 4, that your article is grammatical and typographically free of errors. 5, keep the content in mind of the audience that you're writing to. And finally, make sure you've followed the journal guidelines thoroughly. Okay, and this last slide, this is really why we have the collaboration with the German Scholars Organization. You can, of course, do this work yourself, but if you need our help, this is where we can help you. We have an arrangement with GSO, so anyone that's in that network can buy our services at a reduced cost. And I would urge you to visit this website that's on screen now to get more information about the services that are available at a reduced cost, which include editing, translation, manuscript preparation services, as well as publication support services. Any final questions? I think that's probably about it, everyone. In that case, I'd like to thank everyone for attending this webinar today. Any questions that we haven't addressed, we will be forwarding to the Inago Academy team. So we don't miss anybody out. We will be sending everybody a survey to complete and ask you for your views and your opinions and for feedback. And we very much look forward to hearing your thoughts on this webinar and how we can make this webinar even more useful in the future. Finally, I'd like to thank Anna for her participation today and for telling us all about GSO. And I would like to wish everybody a very happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.